Diplomacy is one of those things in Total War that might seem quite daunting if you're a new player, but it's actually quite simple. However, there are some easy mistakes to make, which may make life harder for yourself if you're trying to make allies out in the world, or if you're trying not to make everyone want to kill you. Firstly though, let's make sure we understand how diplomacy works. Here's a rough illustration of how you can think of it. This bar represents the attitude of another faction towards you. At one end, you're besties with the faction and they love you. At the other end, they're hostile and they want to kick your head off. And in the center is the neutral point at 0, where everything begins. Now let's say on a turn you have a bunch of positive actions between you and a certain faction. Plus 20 for non-aggression pacts and trade agreements, plus 20 for actions against an enemy that the faction doesn't like, and plus 10 for a gift that you gave them of monies, giving you a total of plus 50 positive attitude with this certain faction. So that's all the positives, but they will be offset by the negatives. Let's say minus 20 for some trespassing that you did against the faction, minus 40 for being at war with one of this faction's allies, and minus 10 for just an aversion of them not liking you. All those negatives add up to minus 70. Now what this does is it comes off the positives. So you'll take away 50 from that 70, and that'll push you into the other side of the bar, giving you minus 20 that was left of that 70. So on this particular turn, your relationship would be deteriorating with the faction, and this is happening on every single turn. The actions that go on within a turn will give you these different results of numbers. There's also a bunch of thresholds which once you hit, you enter a certain kind of relationship with any faction. Between 0 and 30, you're neutral. Once you hit 30, you'll be considered friendly with that faction. Up to 70 and you'll be considered very friendly, and then 230, you'll be best friends with a faction. And going the other way, it kind of works the same numbers-wise, minus 30 for unfriendly, minus 70 for very unfriendly, and minus 230 for hostile. This is mostly just to give us an idea of how our relationship is with a faction. So, for example, our boy Karl Franz here wants to try his luck with the Fey Enchantress of Carcassonne, and between them there is 23 positive attitude going on this turn, and only minus 8 negative action. So the Fae thinks Karl's a bit of a bellend, but she likes his cool hat. So it's the 23 positive minus 8 negative. If you combine those two numbers and take the minus 8 off the 23, it leaves you with the total attitude value of 15. Simple enough, right? But that's just a predicted number for the next turn with the current situation. If we do something to change the situation, then the numbers will be affected accordingly. So let's say we give the Fae a little gift to try and woo her along, perhaps a Snickers and some body wash, and she will indeed now have an improved relationship with us, with the total attitude value now being predicted at 25 rather than 15, because we have the extra positive 10 from gifts given to Carcassonne. But as I say, that won't apply until next turn. If she doesn't put out and then I declare war on her this turn, that's obviously going to put a lot of negatives on the relationship. So every action you take per turn has an effect on all the different relationships with all the different factions that you're aware of. Not every faction can potentially be your friend though. For example, Grom with the Broken Axe here, he doesn't want anything to do with Karl Franz. He has a minus 100 aversion to Karl Franz, probably because he's not an orc. So there's no relationship to really build there. So hopefully by this point you get a rough understanding of how diplomacy works. Now I think one mistake that you can make if you're a newer player and you understand the fact that you're playing a single faction, you might think that it's you against the world, but you must understand that there's a real benefit to making allies in Total War and having someone that can back you up in your time of need, or having an ally that you can team up with to take out a much stronger mutual enemy. Very often, aligning with another faction that's the same race as you will have a good chance of you making an ally there. So if you're a greenskin, you might be able to make greenskin friends. If you're a dwarf, you might be able to make dwarf friends. Much easier than anybody else. There's also a better chance of allying with a faction if they're kind of the same as you in either good or evil. The Empire will have a much easier time making friends with Bretonia, the dwarfs, the elves, than they will with the beastmen, the Skaven, or the vampires. Now, building a good relationship with another faction is fairly simple. You'll start off typically with a non-aggression pact to say, hey, we're not going to come at you, don't come at us though, bitch. So it's a mutual assurance of peace for a while. Then you'll probably lead in to a trade agreement if you can get them, which will give you a little bit of income for both sides, and this will build the confidence between you to give each other military access, to allow each other to march through each other's lands without the fear that you're going to try and attack each other's settlements. So these first three non-aggression pact, trade agreement, military access, they're kind of required before you can take the relationship any higher. In some cases, you may get them in a different order. You might get a trade agreement before you get a non-aggression and stuff. Doesn't really matter. As long as you're getting those and building that relationship, you can move on to, eventually, a defensive alliance. This is where you basically swear to try not to let each other die, and you can help each other out in times of need, you can take out mutual enemies, and eventually build the relationship up into a military alliance, which is basically the same but just with a few more options and things you can do with your friendly faction. And like I say, having a strong ally at your side can definitely make life a lot easier. Typically, legendary lord factions are going to be stronger than non-legendary lord factions, but there's a lot of potential good allies out there for all different kinds of lords. So, you understand, building good relationships with other factions can be imperative to success sometimes, to build good relationships, to build allies, and help you along on your campaign. But there are a lot of little mistakes that you can make with diplomacy that can really hurt your relationship progress with a friendly faction, or maybe even turn them against you if you're not careful. The first little mistake you might make is trespassing on land that is not yours. So here in this Imrik campaign, I've got my army sat on the edge of my province, my land, my territory. That's absolutely fine, of course. But next to me is these dwarves, who I'm getting friendly with. I've got a non-aggression pact with them, maybe going to build a relationship with them. But I don't have military access yet, because who wants a big old random army walking around in their lands, right? You can see my relationship with them is currently improving. Things are looking good. If we keep going like this, we'll get that military access, probably a trade agreement as well, and who knows, maybe even an alliance. But if I set foot in their lands without their permission, well, now I'm trespassing, and they're not gonna like it. If we look at our relationship and their attitude towards us now, it's deteriorating. It's now going down, only a little bit, but it's brought a -10 trespasses against Karakazul penalty, and thus my relationship with them just took a hit. And it's not like they're now going to hate me and declare war on me in a few turns. We'll still be able to make friends with them, but it's just going to take a good bit longer now, and I may not have that ally when I need it. So be careful of where you set foot. If you're trying to make friends with somebody, don't set foot in their territory without their permission. It's just going to piss them off. And do be careful even if you're not trying to make friends with somebody. It could just be another reason that you give somebody to declare war on you. Now let's talk about dodgy pacts. What do I mean by dodgy pacts? Well, here's an example. Here I am playing as Cathay. Greasus is coming at me, offering me a non-aggression pact, which might sound like a good idea, right? Non-aggressions are generally a good, positive thing. But we need to be careful of the wider implications. If we take a look at Greasus and the factions that he is at war with, one of them is Helmund Gorst. Now, Helmund Gorst is actually pretty close to me. You can see my settlement here. Helmund Gorst is here. He borders some of my territory. So he's a very probable enemy for me, especially as he already dislikes me because I've got a trade agreement with his enemy Greasus. So turning down Greasus' non-aggression pact, you can see it hasn't given him any negative attitude towards me, so there's no downside to turning down the non-aggression. Whereas if I had accepted it, it would have pissed off Helmund Gorst even more, and there would be more chance that he'd come to war with me sooner. And if I really didn't want to piss off Helmund Gorst, I never should have got the trade agreement with Greasus in the first place. So you can see how even this small interaction, which might seem like only positive, has wider implications for your enemies, your allies, everybody around you. Somebody could be affected by this decision. So check enemies and allies of whoever you're making deals with. Another quick example, same thing again, this time as Clan Angrand, Avalund are offering me a non-aggression for no real reason. I'm not worried about Avalund coming after me, they're not really a threat. But they are at war with two factions that are pretty close to me. Scrag especially is right next to me. If I take that non-aggression with Avalund, it's going to put some negative attitude on Scrag towards me, and that could cause Scrag to come to war with me way sooner than he might otherwise would. Maybe he's going to do it anyway, but at least if I try not to piss him off, it's going to make him do it later, which could be better for me. So I'm not going to accept this non-aggression because there's more risk there than there is reward. So try to read the wider situation, look at enemies and allies, and try to make the best judgment calls. It's going to depend on every different situation. And that goes for trade agreements and military access and such as well, and even peace treaties. A peace treaty might seem like always a really good idea if you want to get rid of all the wars that you might be having, but looking at this Skaven faction that I've got nearly destroyed, they're at war with a faction I'm trying to get friendly with in the Jade Custodians. And you can see my relations with them are currently improving, so things are looking good. But if I go ahead and get the peace with those Skaven, our mutual enemy, we'll see how it affects my relationship with the Jade Custodians, because now our relationship is only friendly and is no longer improving because there's now some minus attitude from that peace treaty with their enemy. And it was a really pointless peace treaty because that enemy is nearly completely wiped out and the faction's entirely gone. They're not really a threat to me, so stay at war until they're done for. So hopefully that gives you the idea of what to watch out for in dodgy pacts. Just because it's a non-aggression, a trade agreement, a peace treaty, it looks nice and positive and like a good thing. Be aware of the wider implications of the enemies and allies of the faction that you're getting these deals with. It may make it much harder to get an ally that you're trying to get, or will anger somebody enough to make you a new enemy. And it's not like you should never accept these deals, but you'll have to weigh the situation up yourself. As I say, it's an endless amount of combinations of things that could be going on that could make the trade agreement a good idea or a bad idea given your situation. Maybe the trade agreement could just wait 5 or 10 turns to come later to make better of a certain situation. Another thing to be careful of, your reliability, the rating of how reliable you are. Are you a bit of a flake that can't be trusted, or are you a sturdy, dependable man of your word? This pretty much comes down to the agreements that you make with other factions. If you get a non-aggression pact and then you declare war on the faction 5 turns later while the non-aggression pact is still going, you will be seen as an absolute bastard who can't be trusted, and thus it will make it much more difficult for you in diplomacy in future because nobody will trust you. So basically, don't make deals that you're not going to stick to. And if you really want to break a deal, there is a certain time limit of when you can actually just cancel the deal and not have any diplomatic penalty. Like after 10 turns of having the deal in place, for example, you can find the information in the tooltips of where you can make the deals. So try not to backstab people, even if you're Skaven, because it will make life much harder for you diplomatically. Now let's talk about the power of trading settlements. Occasionally, you may occupy a settlement that you didn't really want necessarily, that you don't plan to hold on to, but that could be a very useful bargaining chip for getting what you want out of other factions. So in this case, it's that campaign where I'm playing as Cathay, trying to make friends with the Jade Custodians, who own all of the 3 other settlements in this province, so I'm not very likely to get the rest of this province, right? Unless I declare war on them, and as our relationship is friendly and improving, I'm looking to keep that going. So I could trade the settlement to them, take Shangwu, offer it to them, and you'll see it gives me a nice bit of diplomatic bonus with that faction. But I could get some stuff for this instead if I want to. I could get a defensive alliance nearly, just with a little bit of money on the side. And why not try to get them to come to war with one of my enemies as well, these goddamn dissenters. Could put them into the deal, that only puts it at 3. We throw a little bit of money at them as well, and we can get quite a lot out of this deal. We could instead just take the trade and the diplomatic bonus with them to increase our relationship with them a little bit quicker. So it's either or, but in this case, I'm going to go for that defensive alliance, trade them that settlement, give them a little bit of money, get them to come to war with me, and we can build our relationship that way. Now this might be a little bit pointless in some respects because I'll most likely be able to get a defensive alliance with them anyway, just a little bit further down the line. Maybe I should just hold on to that settlement for money, but as you can see, a little bit further down the line, the beastmen come after me, and well, it's nice to have that ally to call to help me to declare war on them, especially as they're currently in their land, so they'll have to deal with them before they reach me. Nice to have that ally on side that little bit sooner. Also, shortly after, Deathmaster Snitch came after me as well, but he was already at war with the Jade Custodians, but still, it helped to have that ally just that little bit sooner. So keep an eye out for settlements that you can take that you may not want to hold on to, you may not want to try and take the whole province of, but you can take and give to somebody else to gain something out of them. Whether they're an enemy or an ally, you can still potentially make some kind of use of trading that settlement to them. So there we go, a few ways to help you avoid any diplomatic blunders that may help build your relationships with friendly factions a little bit quicker, and that may slow the rate of somebody declaring war on you, or maybe increasing the rate at which you can get peace with a faction, just making life a little bit easier for you in your campaign. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I will see you in the future.